Dr. Nightechoes. Two strange things happened in one night. Both involved the same friend. Both happened when I had to use the bathroom. Around 10 p.m., I left our campsite to walk to the restrooms. They were about a quarter-mile away. It was pitch dark. As I walked, I saw a friend from our group step onto the main path. He came from a path leading to an empty, unused site. My friend has a very strange and specific way of walking. I knew it was him instantly. He stayed about 40 feet ahead of me. He kept turning around and asking, "Why are you following me?" I told him I was just going to the bathroom. I asked why he was coming from a different site. He didn't answer. He just sped up and vanished into the blackness. I finished my business and went back to camp. My friend was sitting there. I asked why he was messing with me, but everyone swore he never left his seat. I figured they were just playing a prank. At 3 a.m., I woke up needing to pee again. I didn't want to walk far, so I just went into the woods nearby. As I walked back, I heard a tent zipper slide open. I could tell it was my friend's tent. I heard him zip it back up. I saw him move toward the cars. He stopped to light a cigarette. I saw his face clearly in the sparks of the lighter. He took a puff and looked at me. He asked, "Can you hear me?" I told him I could. He asked again, much louder, "Can you hear me?" I told him to be quiet before he woke everyone up. He just shook his head and walked behind a car. I followed him, wanting to catch him in his lie. I rounded the corner of the car, but the space was empty. He was gone. I walked to his tent and looked inside. He was fast asleep and snoring loudly. Whatever I talked to by the cars wasn't him, even though it had his face. My dog would not calm down for about 45 minutes. We were walking around looking for a good place to set up our camp. Her hackles were up and she was grumbling with a deep, low growl. She was completely on edge, which is very unlike her usual behavior. She is usually a calm companion, but something in those woods was bothering her. I started hearing male voices drifting through the trees. They sounded very close to us, but I could not make out a single word they were saying. It was a strange, muffled chatter that never seemed to stop. I was on my way up a huge hill at the time. I tried to tell myself it was just a strange kind of sound travel bouncing off the rocks. The voices would come and go. Sometimes they sounded like they were right around the corner from where I stood. I started to feel a deep sense of dread. The air felt heavy, and I felt really unsafe in that spot. I did not wait to see who was talking. I turned around, got back in my car, and booked it out of there as fast as I could. I know there could be simple explanations for noises in the woods. Maybe it was the wind or other campers far away. However, in all of my many camping trips, I have never felt that much fear. I trust my intuition when it tells me to leave. My dog felt it too, and she did not stop looking back until we were miles away. Whatever was speaking in those woods did not want us to stay. The memory of those low, rhythmic voices still makes my skin crawl. I never went back to that hill again. I have never actually been camping myself. However, a family died at a lake I visited once. The family consisted of a little boy, a dad, and a mom. They were camping by the water when they were all mauled by a bear. It was a very violent way to go. Supposedly, if you go near the cabins where they died, you can hear their screams. Some people even claim to see their ghosts wandering the shore. I do not know if it is true, but after dying in such a horrific manner, I would believe it. In that same lake, there are also many reports of satanic rituals. People say occult things happen there constantly. You can often hear creepy chanting echoing across the water at night. My brother was very careful when he took us there. He visited during the day and made sure we left before darkness fell. He knew the stories and did not want to take any chances with our safety. My other brother went there once with his classmates at night. They were passing by a remote road when they suddenly heard chanting. They looked across the road and saw people dressed in long robes. The group was standing in a circle and chanting loudly. My brother and his friends got very quiet. They turned off their lamps and hid in the shadows. They waited for the robed people to leave before they continued on their way. He told us later that they were terrified. They thought the cult might go after them if they were spotted. The lake feels cursed, and I still think about those screams.
There is a lot of Native American land in Wisconsin. One campsite in particular is called Indian Mound Reservation. While I was in the Boy Scouts, I had a very unpleasant experience there. I was sleeping in my tent when I suddenly woke up. I heard footsteps walking around the outside of my tent. It was autumn, so you could clearly hear a two-step walk in the fallen leaves. However, it sounded as if the feet were dragging heavily through the debris. The leaves were slightly damp, so it did not make a dry, crinkling sound. It was more of a thick, wet, sliding noise. The presence would walk all the way around my tent. Then, it would stop right by my front door. It would pause for a brief moment before turning around. Then, it would walk back the other way. This was not like a movie where something starts banging on the walls. It was much more subtle and terrifying. I stayed perfectly still and followed the sound with just my head moving. I did not want to make a single noise. If you have ever experienced the paranormal, you know exactly what I mean. You can feel the difference between a human presence and a spirit. This did not feel like a person who was lost in our campsite. It felt like something much older. The camp is covered in burial mounds. They look like the small dirt berms you would find at a gun range. I lay there in the dark, knowing that something from those mounds was standing just inches away from my head. I didn't open the zipper to look. I just waited for the sun to come up. I was solo camping in the Great Smoky Mountains when the sun went down. I was miles from any other person and enjoying the deep silence of the woods. Suddenly, I started hearing what sounded exactly like a toddler crying in the distance. It was faint, but very persistent. I knew enough about the woods to know that bobcats and foxes can sound human. However, this was something different. It sounded like actual words being whispered through the trees. I could clearly hear the words, "help" and "momma," echoing in the dark. I did not leave my tent to investigate the sound. I stayed inside with my handgun drawn and my heart racing. The crying circled my campsite for 3 hours straight. It would get closer to the tent and then drift further away into the brush. Whatever it was, it never crossed into the dim light of my dying embers. I sat there in the pitch blackness, listening to the small, sobbing voice. I did not close my eyes for a single second that night. The next morning, I stepped outside to pack up my gear and leave. I froze when I looked at the side of my rainfly. I found several small handprints pressed into the fabric of the tent. They were about the size of a 4-year-old child's hands. There were no footprints on the ground nearby. I left the area immediately and never went back. Those cold, tiny prints still haunt my memories. This happened in the high desert of Oregon. I was sleeping in the back of my truck bed and enjoying the quiet night. I woke up suddenly because the truck felt like it was being rocked gently. It felt exactly like someone was pushing on the rear bumper with their hands. I figured it was just a curious cow or a stray deer.
I sat up and looked out the back window into the darkness. I saw a tall, pale figure standing at the edge of the sagebrush. It was probably 7 feet tall and very thin. It was not moving at all. It just stood there, perfectly still, watching the truck. I grabbed my powerful spotlight and hit the figure with the bright beam. The light did not reflect off it like it would off skin or clothes. It was like the light just hit a deep void and disappeared. The creature did not run away or make a sound. It just sort of faded into the brush as I watched. It was there 1 second and gone the next. I did not sleep for the rest of the night. I sat there with my heart racing until the sun came up. I left the area at first light and never looked back. I still don't know if that thing was solid or just a shadow. The way it pushed my truck still haunts my dreams.
I live in Southwest Virginia. I spend a lot of my time outdoors, in the deep woods. I have seen strange orbs of light among the trees numerous times. These lights are usually white or a dull orange color. They float silently through the brush. I often see them on private land, where I know no one else should be. There is no reason for anyone to be out there at night. The lights do not behave like flashlights or lanterns. They move with a strange, steady grace. They appear and disappear without making a single sound. It is very creepy stuff to witness when you are alone. I always feel like something is watching me from the shadows behind the glow. I do not stay long once the orbs appear. I usually turn around and head back to my house as fast as I can.
A few years back, I was camping in the Ocala National Forest with 2 buddies. We were deep in the woods, about 4 miles from any road or official trail. Around 2 a.m., the entire forest went completely silent. There were no crickets, no owls, and no wind. The silence felt heavy and wrong. Then we heard a sound that chilled us to the bone. It was a woman laughing. It did not sound like a recording or a distant noise. It sounded like she was standing maybe 20 feet away from our tent. The laughter was clear and sharp in the still night air. We all sat up instantly and grabbed our knives and flashlights. We stepped out of the tent together, ready to face whoever was there. We shined our lights into the thick brush, but there was nobody in sight. The woods remained perfectly still and empty. Then we looked down at the ground near our feet. The weirdest part was what we found in the dirt. There was a pair of bare footprints leading right up to our tent flap. They were fresh and clearly visible in the soft earth. However, they just stopped right there. There was no trail leading to the spot and no trail leaving it. There were just 2 footprints pointing directly at our door. It was as if someone had dropped from the sky and stood there watching us sleep. We packed our gear and left as soon as the sun came up. I have experienced a lot of strange things in the woods. I will tell you about my most recent one. Last summer, I was camping with my girlfriend and her family. Her parents had just bought a new camper the year before. It was very nice and clean. I was sleeping on the bottom bunk. Her younger sister was fast asleep on the top bunk. My girlfriend and I were the only ones still awake. My window was tilted open just a little bit. I was looking at my phone for a few minutes before going to sleep. Then, I heard the gravel rustling around the camper. The sounds were clearly footsteps. I could tell there were only 2 feet. It sounded exactly like a person walking. The footsteps got closer and closer. Finally, they stopped right next to me. My window was tilted open, but the glass was darkly tinted. I could not see anything outside. I quickly shut off my phone and waited. I was terrified that they saw the light from my screen. I felt like someone was staring at me through the dark glass.
I waited until I heard the footsteps slowly walk away. I immediately texted my girlfriend to tell her what happened. She texted back right away. She had heard the footsteps too. Then we both heard a new sound. Something was unzipping the two tents parked about 10 feet from the camper. We heard someone rustling through the bags inside. We stayed perfectly still in the dark. We did not know if it was a person or something else. We just listened to the fabric rip and the zippers slide in the silence.
It was Wednesday, August 3rd, 2016. I had just arrived in Vicksburg, Mississippi. After checking into my hotel, I decided to tour the Siege of Vicksburg battlefield. I paid the $12 fee and drove through the gates. The road was lined with statues, plaques, and stones. They were engraved with names, dates, and ranks. I was driving slowly through the area that once held the Union lines. I came across an old Civil War cannon and decided to stop. It sat just outside a thicket of trees and brush. The weapon was still aimed toward the enemy lines. I got out of my car to take some photos. After I turned on my camera, I looked up at the trees and froze. There, just a few yards to my right, stood a Union soldier. He was wearing a blue uniform and carrying a rifle. My heart stopped because I could see right through his body. He was translucent and pale. He took a single step forward and then vanished into thin air. He did not seem to notice me at all. He felt like a recording playing back from the past. I was so shaken that I dictated all the facts into my iPhone immediately. This was the first battlefield ghost I have ever seen. It was a true residual haunting that I will never forget. I can still see the way the light passed through his blue coat before he disappeared. The air turned cold, and I knew I wasn't alone.